on resume writing and interview skills, and will provide practical guidance on how to best structure your resume and how to make a good first impression, especially for those second-year members of Audiology Australia who are attending the mock interview sessions next week. Just briefly before we start, the Can Do group in Adelaide is comprised of Deaf Can Do, which is the Royal South Australian Deaf Society, and Can Do for Kids, Townsend House, which is an early intervention business supporting families who have children who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, low vision, or any other sensory needs, such as autism. At Can Do Group, we also have a social enterprise business called Can Do Hearing, and we do ourselves hire regularly audiologists. So I did pop into my chief audiologist's office this afternoon to have a quick chat and ask him the very first question, which we're going to be asking our panelists today. That question is, when you receive an application or you commence an interview, what is the one thing that impresses you right away? And perhaps also tell us, what is that one thing that turns you off right away? My chief audiologist said his answer to this was that passion is the very first thing he looks for in an applicant. And the thing that turns him away is when an applicant walks in and knows nothing about who we are or what our business does, meaning they haven't taken the time to investigate us. So I'm now going to turn this same question over to all of our panelists, and I'll just call them out one by one. Ask if you could introduce yourselves, where you work, and answer that question for me, please. I'm just going to go through the screen as I see people, so I'll turn over to JC Fellows.
Hi, so my name's JC. I'm the National Manager for Audiology at Bloom Hearing Specialists. So I look after the clinical element of the business, our HSP relationships products, but more importantly for this conversation, recruitment, more specifically graduate recruitment. So for me, the answer to that question, I had a sort of a similar theme. One of the things that impresses me is someone that has done their research on my business and who I am specific to audiology, rather than a generic CV that could cover all audiology industry. And a turn away for me, spelling mistakes and formatting. Have a resume I can read, on font size I can read, and try and avoid that cursive text. That's probably the two key things for me.
Great, thanks JC. Just go now to Carl Sagan.
Hey everyone, I'm Carl. I'm the Managing Director of ACM Healthcare. We're Australia's only dedicated hearing health recruitment agency. I'm also the Operations Manager for acmsupport.com.au. It's a resource and training platform for all job seekers. One thing that will impress me when someone comes in for an interview, just like your chief audiologist said, is passion and high energy. Someone that wants to be at the interview is someone that actually does impress me. If you look like you don't want to be there, it looks like you haven't prepared.
Great, thank you. Mandy Nyhoff, I'll ask you to talk to us next, please. Mandy, I believe you're still on mute.
Okay. Yeah, I'm an audiologist. I've been an audiologist for the past 30 years, and I'm the owner of Brindabella Hearing and Speech Centre in Canberra. We hire, as our name suggests, hire speech pathologists and audiologists, and we currently have about 28 employees. One of the challenges I face, I guess, is the buck stops with me. So I am the recruiter, and I work directly with the people that I recruit. When I'm looking specifically at the application side of things prior to interviewing someone, the first thing that impresses me is whether the formatting of the application is professional, and how they present themselves in terms of the documents they send through, and also what they write in the body of the email. I'm always very specific in terms of putting my name in the job ad. So I'm always interested to see if they actually address me by name or if they address me as Sir, Madam. And I'm also interested in how they communicate with me after they've sent through the application. So if I send them an email inviting them for an interview or something, how quickly do they get back to me? How is that email written? Is it well communicated, or is it something that they've just flicked out to me? I really look for the qualities in people that you can't teach, so beyond the technical skills of audiology. And I look for someone who's looking at this job opportunity as an opportunity for them rather than, you know, maybe doing us a favour by coming to work for us. And in terms of what puts me off, instantly, the biggest showstopper for me is poor spelling and grammar. And poorly formatted documents, as I said. So I like to receive things in an uneditable format like PDF rather than a Word document. And as I think JC said also, I just like to feel that they're applying for this job. And it's, you know, that they've taken the time to research who they're applying for and that it's crafted towards the role and our business. And just finally, the advice I'd give is before you hit send is proofread the application. Because there's always often a lot of obvious areas that could have been avoided without, if they had proofread the application.
Excellent. Thank you, Mandy. I'll now ask Omar Khan if you can answer this question for us, please.
Thank you, Heidi. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all virtually. My name is Umair Khan. I'm the HR Manager, Field Operations for Amplifon Australia. I say Australia because Amplifon operates globally across 28 countries, and I am privileged to lead our field operations team for our Australian region, which includes which has a workforce of more than 1,000 employees across 200 locations. Globally, Amplifon has 17,000 employees across 11,000 clinics. So I am proud to say that we are the #1 global leader in hearing healthcare. The one thing that would impress us right away, your resume is your first impression. So what would impress us at Amplifon when we look at your application is your passion, is your professionalism shining in your application, that you took care and love in creating a resume, that you are proud and excited to showcase to us who you are and what you've done to date. What would turn us away? It's the opposite of what I mentioned earlier, I guess. So if your application comes across as though the opportunity you've applied for is just a job for you, then that will turn us away. At Amplifon, we don't offer jobs. We offer a career, not a job. So this is a huge commitment for both of us. So if your application is missing the care, the passion, the professionalism, that will turn us away. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Omer. Okay, Christian Sagan, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm Christian Sagan from a boutique healthcare agency called ACM Healthcare. I've actually specialized specifically within the hearing industry recruitment for the past 5 years. My manager and brother, Carl Sagan, also on the panel, he's specialized in the industry for close to about 15. So across that time, we've helped hundreds of hearing health professionals find work across manufacturing, retail, as well as national providers all across Australia. So I guess today just wanted to see if I'd be able to put a little bit of that insight to all of you guys, see where I can help. And I've also had the opportunity to go to Audiology Australia conferences and ACOD conferences, so it's given me a little bit of insight, you know, how the industry operates as well. But to answer your question, Heidi, I think as a recruiter, from our perspective, obviously we put up job advertisements, all that stuff, and we get hundreds of applications sometimes, and some applications do stick out more than others, and we shortlist. I like to be pretty thorough and not leave any stone unturned. So I generally like to have a conversation with everyone that applies, so I can get a gauge of how they are sort of over the phone or in person, as opposed to just judging a book by its cover on the application, even though that is very important. But what impresses me is when I get that applicant that actually sees my ad, sees my contact details, and gives me a call. And if they're able to sort of foster that relationship, you know, introduce who they are, let me know why they're calling, and sort of develop that relationship with me over the phone. Those are the sort of proactive confidence. Those are the traits that I look for in great candidates. So instead of just matching resume, sometimes I like to have a conversation with them. So if they call me up and they can display that confidence, that really works quite well in my books. I think what turns me away it's going to be quite common, bad grammar and spelling on a resume or application, because end of the day, you know, you're applying for a position and you've got time in the comfort of your own home to make a perfect application. So when there's spelling mistakes or spelling errors and grammar mistakes, it's a direct reflection of how you might work in a professional environment. So yeah, if you can't have great grammar and spelling in the comfort of your own home, then it just makes the hiring manager think, how are they going to react when they're in a professional environment that's fast-paced, chatting with you know, their colleagues, their boss, external stakeholders, things like that. So that's something that sort of turns me away straight away.
Great. Thank you, Christian. Shawnee Graves, you can answer this question for us, please. I think you're on mute, Shawnee. There you are.
Sorry. Thank you, Heidi. Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Shawnee Graves. I'm head of audiology at Monash Health, the largest health in Victoria, and has 5 hospitals, a private hospital, numerous community health service and aged care facilities. In Canada, I like a letter response that I've placed. I ask the person, you know, to direct any inquiries to myself or my deputy. So if they're writing their cover letter, I like it to have my name or my deputy's name, not dear sir, madam, which I think was mentioned before. I like the ad to the cover letter to refer to the job ad or the job position number, and also to be written for the actual job they're applying for, not just a generic dear so-and-so, I want to apply for the job. And the CV needs to be customised for the role that they're applying for, not just a generic CV. What my turn is, I have an application where it's addressed to the head of the audiology department at a completely different hospital. That was into no file, very bad spelling. I don't like we have an application said can do AI examination. I can do. You've passed the course. I'm assuming you know how to do all of that. Tell me why I want to hire you. So they're the things. Yeah, they're the things.
Great. And
Everyone else has really talked about all of the other things. So I'd be repeating.
Excellent. Thanks, Shawnee. And Megan has joined us now. Megan Hill, do you want to answer? So the question, I believe you probably know, is just what impresses you and what turns you away at first impressions?
Yeah, very much the same as the others. So for me, it's more what stands out. So it needs to be really neat, tidy, and presentable, obviously with an application, but not like you tend to read lots of cover letters over and over again, and they all read the same. So it's like people have got a template. So for me, I like the punchy front lines. Tell me how you're different. Tell me what makes you different and why we want to employ you. So, and personality, you need to actually see people's personality come through, because obviously if someone's done a degree, the skill set is there, they have the expertise, but how are they going to deliver, you know, the personable approach as a clinician? You need to have a bedside, well, not so much bedside, but you need to have that manner to be able to look after your clients. So, you know, how are people showing that in their application and in their cover letter? And also what interests, you know, what do people do outside of work? That can tell you a lot about what a person's like, and whether they're going to be a good team member. So it's not just the IQ, it's the EQ as well for me.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I've just lost, okay. So it's just I've just lost the sound in the right ear. How ironic. Okay, so we'll just thank you everyone. That was really good. It does sound like there was a lot of similarities in that. So I think we all have learned that it's really important that you pay attention when you're writing your application, and that you pay attention to details about who you're applying to, but also about just basic details in a CV. So I'm just going to follow on from that. If there's anything else anyone wanted to add just around a CV, if there's any particular must-haves that someone must have in their CV, and you can consider things like the cover letter. I don't think we've really touched upon the length of a CV. I received one the other day that was 12 pages. So it was fairly interesting. I don't know who thinks that we're going to sit around reading a 12-pager. About some of the language, we've talked already about grammar and spelling. What relevant experience would you like to see in there? Are you interested in the person's education, and how far back do you want them to go? Does anyone have any opinions on whether there's a photo or no photo in there and how that plays out for someone? So I'll just hand over to Omar to start us off for this one, please.
Sorry, I was on mute. Phrase of 2020. Thank you, Heidi. Just a few points on those things that you mentioned. A cover letter is of course important. Don't make it too lengthy. I think just a one page is fine. It's just a quick summary of who you are and why are you interested. With the length of the CV, it's important not to over-engineer your resume. So focus on your relevant experience, your key experience. Doesn't matter if you worked in McDonald's, because in retail, customer service experience is also the key. In terms of the grammar and spelling, of course, the using correct grammar and spelling is important. But we also know that some candidates suffer from a disability such as dyslexia. So a CV may have some mistakes, and that's okay. We understand that at Amplifon. What I would recommend is when you finish your resume, show it to another person. Could be a member of your family or a friend, a colleague, so they can review it with fresh set of eyes. They might pick up on something that you may have missed. With photos, excuse me, photos are not needed, but if you do want to include your photo, please make sure that it is professional and it's not something that you would put up on Facebook or Instagram. You can certainly add a link of your LinkedIn profile if you have a profile, but we don't need to know your Facebook links or Instagram accounts. But my personal recommendation would be that you don't really need to put up a photo. Thank you.
Thanks. I think Mandy, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Omer. I think the CV shouldn't be too long. I generally am pretty impressed if I see a CV that's one page in length. I think it's important to include information that, particularly at their level of expertise, that does describe their achievements and their activities. As I think Megan said, what they do outside of work gives you a bit of an insight too into what sort of individual they are, how they might be in the workplace. I do like to see a cover letter because I think, again, it gives the applicant the opportunity to demonstrate not only their language and communication skills, but be able to address the job, and if there's specific selection criteria, that as well. I don't feel the need for a photo. I don't think that that's necessarily relevant. But again, for me, what I'm looking for in that cover letter in particular is attention to detail. With audiology, it's a technical profession. We need to have a high level of attention to detail. And again, as I said earlier, I like to read between the lines, and that's an indicator for me. If those things are formatted well and they're presented well, that suggests to me that this audiologist will also show that attention to detail in the role.
Thank you. I think JC wanted to add to this one as well.
Yeah, a lot of it has been said, but I agree a cover letter is really important, especially for grads where you haven't had much in the way of work experience. But again, I think it's similar to what Megan said. Don't Google how to write a cover letter because they do come out sounding very, very similar. So make sure you do target it to the business. Again, I like to see a resume. If you can get it 1 to 2 pages, great. Things like Year 12 subjects, not necessary. We know you've got your masters, so I think target it to that and the specifics. When it comes to a photo, I think for me it's probably different based on what they're applying for. If it's a sort of a qualified practitioner role, it's not really necessary. But when it comes to graduate recruitment, there are over 100 that come through at the same time, and a photo really does help when it comes to reading through, because I find for me personally, I can remember the attributes with.
Thank you, JC. I just went quiet. I don't know if JC went quiet for others at the end there. I'm a bit nervous that it's my headset.
No, JC, I think that might have been your sound, but
Okay.
yep, you're all good coming through now.
Okay. Did anyone else want to add to that question? Yep, Christian.
Yep, I guess a lot of my thoughts very similar to what everyone else is saying here as well. I think for applying for work as a graduate, having a cover letter, it's definitely a must. I guess there's no perfect structure on how to write a cover letter, but just make sure that when someone picks it up, it's definitely punchy and not boring, and definitely tailored to the position as well. When you look at a cover letter, it's your opportunity to really sell yourself. And end of the day, if it's not punchy and you're not addressing the main selection criteria at the same time, it could mean the difference between your resume getting skimmed over and getting a potential phone call, or just going into another applicant pile, which you don't want that to happen. But yeah, at the same time, very essential for a high volume application for graduates is to have a great cover letter. In terms of length of CV, completely agree with everyone else. Doesn't have to be too long at all. 2 pages is perfect. If you're down the track, many years under your belt in terms of experience, of course, you probably have a resume that's like 5-6 pages. But as a graduate and with a lot of competition, you just want to have everything as relevant as you could possibly make it. So put everything in there that the hiring manager will want to see, like put yourself in their shoes. They want to see what placements you've been in, what volunteer experience or what extracurricular activities you might have. So they can sort of not just see how you are professionally, but personally as well. And even your work experience that you might have had starting your career all the way up to when you've graduated, that shows your transferable skills, which would be good in an audiology role. Because at the end of the day, with any person-facing position, customer service is definitely paramount. So if you've worked in any role that can display that customer service, or maybe even sales ability, administrative ability, that's all things that the hiring manager wants to see. What else were we talking about earlier? A photo. Personally, I don't think a photo is too necessary. I do see photos sometimes. For me, it's neither here nor there. I normally just skim over it. I think that the content of your CV and cover letter should really speak instead of just seeing a photo of like a selfie of yourself on your resume. But,
thanks, Christian. What would you say, Christian, to the question, do you recommend that the cover letter and resume are in separate documents? Do you have an opinion on if that matters?
Well, I've seen it in either ways. It depends on how the company's actual system takes the applications in, whether it goes through a CRM or it comes directly to email. So to me, either way, it could be in separate emails, in separate attachments, or even just in the body of the email is fine. Like I've seen that email comes in, I can just really quickly see that this candidate, who the candidate is, why they're contacting me, why I should actually contact them. And, that's, if it's a good cover letter, that's going to entice me to go and look at their resume and, potentially give them a phone call.
Omer, did you have a comment on that one?
Just a very quick comment. I think that was a very good question because in some of the recruitment systems, when you upload multiple documents, it appears in different formats, in different fields. So for a recruiter, for a HR professional, there could be an opportunity where they miss seeing the cover letter that you've uploaded. So that would be a shame when you spend so much time and energy and love in creating that resume and the cover letter and we miss it. So I would recommend just have one document. Page 1 is the cover letter, and then page 2 is your resume onwards, just to avoid any documents being missed. Thank you, Heidi.
Omer, can you just explain what you were saying there? What are the different ways that someone could submit a resume that would affect this? So you just mentioned depends on how you're submitting it.
Sure. So depending on the organization, I guess, for some organizations don't have a specific recruitment system. They might just advertise a job on Seek, which a lot of people would be familiar with, and you can upload your documents through Seek. So from Seek, as an employer, when we receive the resume, we can log on to the Seek account, and it shows us different portals and options where we can view application and download resumes. In other organizations who are able to spend a lot more money on a customized recruitment system or one of those more, I guess, the Lamborghinis or the Ferraris of the systems out there, it offers much more, more complexity, more options for the employer. Because you have so many options in there, there could be an opportunity where when you upload multiple documents, could be your driver's license, for example, or your qualifications. In all that pool of documents visible to us, we might just miss that one file that says cover letter. So I think when you're also uploading a document, make sure that you name the file as cover letter. So we know that this is a document, that is your cover letter, not a driver's license, for example.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Omer. Was there anyone else that wanted to actually speak to the question about systems, specific systems that you use in recruitment? Yeah, Carl?
So when you deal with any recruitment agency, actually any kind of large scale company, they will have what we call an ATS, applicant tracking system. It's good to have your CV and cover letter, like Omer said, in good readable formats, because the system will actually, when you send an application in, it'll parse it into the system itself. If for some reason you aren't successful for the job, it means that your application will still be there at a later date. So when you do finally get some more experience and you send another CV, they can quickly search up if you've applied before. A lot of the industry is moving towards this kind of technology. So I do recommend what Omer said, and just keeping in front of mind that this will go, like your CV and cover letter will go through a specialized system to create a file for you for future applications.
Great, thank you. If no one else wants to talk about system, I will just briefly mention it. We use an online system to all of our applications go through this system. It's called Express. I'm not trying to promote it in any way, but the ability of this system when we get applications is it doesn't just give us the CV and a cover letter. It gives us all the client details. It allows us to ask for salary expectations. It allows us to ask generalized questions as in, do you have the right to live and work in Australia? And other, kind of screening questions that we may want to ask. When we use this system, it also does behind the scenes somewhat of a slight personality test, where it's very quick, very brief, where it just gives someone 81 words and you have to just tick the ones that are like you. And it's one of the things that we find in the system is it probably takes 20 minutes to apply for a job with us once you're already prepared your cover letter and your CV. But it also means that we're not getting anyone who's just flicking emails and CVs off to anybody, and we're not getting a standardized response because it takes people time. So as soon as someone doesn't complete one of the steps in our system, that's an immediate red flag to us. They're likely not that interested. I shall leave that one there, and we'll look at our next question, which is probably relevant to a few of our listeners today around if you don't have a lot of experience in the audiology field or a lot of professional work experience, how do you sell yourself? What do you want to see in somebody's CV in that case? Would someone like to take that question? JC?
Yeah, it is always a harder one when you haven't had that experience, but I like to see, and others have mentioned it, the passion regarding the area of audiology that I'm in. So people that apply our business is adult rehabilitation and hearing aids, so it's more of a strong focus on those practices that they've been able to have and what they've enjoyed there, rather than I see sometimes people focusing on diagnostics and pediatrics, which is not the area of audiology for my business. Also and I think someone else mentioned it before, any customer service, whether it is, I think McDonald's was the example, is fantastic, because the big portion of our business is interacting and building rapport with customers. So that's really important, no matter where it's been. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, that's all right. Omer.
Thank you, Heidi. Firstly, I think just be honest and upfront about this. If you don't have work experience, or if you have little experience, it's okay. As I mentioned earlier, you don't have to over-engineer your resume or make any misleading sort of statements. At Amplifon, skills we can teach you. We can provide the experience and the training that you need to becoming a really good audiologist, be it local training or international training, whether it's Madrid or Milan or London or wherever it may be. So if you have little or no work experience, that's okay. Don't worry. Showcase to us your, as I mentioned earlier, your passion, your interest in joining Amplifon. So when you're working on your resume, talk about the learnings that you've had from your university, from your courses. So you can still have an impressive resume where we can see and read your interest and your passion and your personality. I keep on using the word passion because it really aligns to our core values and our purpose of Amplifon in our business. So for us, that's very, very important to make sure that we are the right business for you, but also that you are the right fit for us as well.
Excuse me. Yes, Mandy.
Yeah, I concur with all those comments as well. And I guess I come back to what I'm really looking for is try and use your CV to create a picture of who you are as a person, because that's the best indicator we have as to whether you're going to fit into our culture. I look at things on the CV that demonstrate a level of tenacity, that they've seen things through. And again, I do think it's really important if you can demonstrate that connection with work where you've had customer service or contact with the general public, to build those communication skills that are so critical in audiology work.
Thanks, Mandy. We're going to wrap up on CV shortly. I did want to say, I think it was JC mentioned the fact that if you didn't work in the area, or you're not specifically interested in the area of audiology that you're applying for, then you might just be careful about what you put in there so that you're relatable to the place you're applying. But what I would like to just specifically ask is if someone's only audiology experience is as a student or in their graduate year, what do you want them to talk about in that? How do you want skills listed or interests listed or places where they had their clinical experience? How can they frame that to sell themselves? Shawnee, you look like you wanted to jump into that one.
Sorry, Shawnee, you will just need to unmute on your end.
I'm quite happy for the students or the new grads to list their clinical placement, but I'd like to be list about their experience and about the different experience and why they want to work in public health, because it's a different mindset in public health than it is in other organisations. I think that's important. The other thing is that they don't have a lot of experience. My experience maybe seeing younger cousins or relatives, and that for me, because we're predominantly, you might have customer service skills, but you have negotiation skills with children and handling of tricky situations with children. Yeah.
Great. Is there someone else that wanted to add to that? No. Okay. Then I think, unless there's anything else anyone wanted to say specifically on CVs that you don't feel has been touched, like some major errors or anything like that, give you a minute. No? Okay, let's move on to the interview then. So now the person has got past that, they have the most fantastic CV, you're excited to meet them, and they're coming in your front door. Let's start with how you develop your very first impressions. What are the basic kind of things you expect? What are your must-dos, must-sees at that very first interview? Christian, do you want to take that?
Yep. So what I think with interviews doesn't really have to be specifically tips for audiologists for interviews. A lot of the main top interview tips is universal. So firstly, I'd say definitely be on time. Doesn't have to be extremely early or anything like that, but don't be too late as if you're flustered. Just make sure that you're on time. Secondly, make sure you dress to, it doesn't really have to be like a dress to go to a wedding or anything like that, but dress smart. It shows that you mean business, you're serious, you know, you appreciate the time that you're given for that interview. Thirdly, I'd probably say your body language. So I'd say your non-verbal cues just as good as your verbal cues. So make sure that you smile, you have a strong handshake, you got eye contact, all of that stuff. And yeah, lastly, I think the more you prepare, the more confident you're going to feel during the interview. So confidence is definitely a good thing that clients are going to look for. Not sort of arrogance, but that you're confident in your ability. And the more that you prepare beforehand, the more that confidence is going to show. So whether it be you practicing some very common interview questions in your bedroom or in front of a colleague, practice it out loud, practice your responses and like formulate how you're going to say things, because sometimes you can have a picture in your head about how it wants to come out, but unless you've practiced, it sort of comes out a little bit easier in that sense.
Thanks, Christian. I just want to say in this day and age, a strong handshake's not the best.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
that does also lead me
strong
to
elbow.
a really good question that has been posted by an attendee around how you prepare for a virtual interview and how you would approach a virtual interview. So I'll go to Omer, who had his hand up next, if you want to hit the virtual interview part, or if you just want to talk about first impressions, and then we'll go to other people who may want to address the virtual.
Sure. Thank you, Heidi. I can cover both, but just for the first impression in your interview, I do love this question, and I love participating in interviews as well. But firstly, smile. Absolutely. You know, make sure you have a nice smile. It's okay to be nervous. Even I get nervous after whatever numbers after so many years of experience. But it's okay to be nervous. But use the opportunity to get to know us. See if Amplifon and you can be best friends. So imagine you're going out there trying to hunt for your best friend. So it's okay to be nervous, but really use that opportunity. Ask questions, interact in the interview. Interviews don't have to be so formal. So let's smile and laugh together. That would make both of us, I guess, less nervous. And for the other part about the virtual interview, that's a really, I guess, good question. And with everything going on, it's changed the way everything has been happening. But I think for virtual interviews, again, your personal grooming, it's important. Make sure you do look professional. Just because you're doing an interview from home doesn't mean you could be in your hoodies. So to make sure that you have you're in a nice room with good sound. You have a good network connection. So whether if it's your Wi-Fi, make sure that you're sitting in a room where there is a strong connection, so there's no disturbance, things like that. They're the basics. And then one of the challenges you will have in a home is you could have kids or your pets, for example, and so there could be background noise. And it's okay. We're not expecting us to be in a completely soundproof corner of the world. Those type of things are okay. So, but if you can avoid. If you can, go through the environment that you are in to make sure that you have a good, nice, comfortable environment, mainly for you as well, then that would be the key. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Omer. And I'm remembering that audiology is all about communication. So I would just say to candidates, presenting yourself well online really does set you up for having a good interview, because we're looking for good communicators. So JC, with that, I'll just ask you to answer the question.
Yeah, a lot of it's been covered exactly around presentation, etc. And I was actually going to talk about the fact that a lot of interviews now are online. So have a bit of a think about what's behind you as well, in terms of just making sure, I've seen some interviews where people, their computer might be in their bedroom and the bed's not made and there's a pile of clothes there. So just have a bit of a think about that. And also there are some that are now pre-recorded. So we did actually do some of our interviews pre-recorded questions to enable us to go through them, and I agree it can be very awkward. I would just recommend practicing having a bit of a discussion It sounds a bit crazy, but with yourself, because that's how you're going to be doing it, make sure you do look at that little light that is on your laptop camera, because that's what we're looking at. It is a bit of a difficult situation having an interview at first on your own, and we appreciate the fact that it is a different situation and it is uncomfortable. But yeah, as I said, make sure you've thought about what's in the background, that you're sitting up looking at the camera rather than this sort of thing that I've seen as well. And it's easy enough to do because you're getting no feedback, but yeah, we do understand how awkward it is.
JC, can you just explain that a little bit further? Because
Sure.
One person has asked that interviews are now conducted one way. I'm assuming they're actually talking about the same thing that you are. And just talk to me a little bit about what you're doing and why you're doing it that way.
Sure. It's only for the graduate recruitment, and just because of the sheer numbers. It enables us to get through them and go through the interviews within a time that suits everybody. So the grad can record it between classes. They're lucky enough to be outside of Victoria, and work and things like that. And then from our perspective, we can then get through them far quicker rather than trying to book them in initially. So it's a really great screening process for us. But as I said, I appreciate it is a bit weird. You get a person reading out a question, and you then record your answer. Before actually going in, because you do get, I think, 2 goes at recording the question, have a bit of a think around common interview questions. As I said, have a go at sort of reading it out to yourself. Practice staring at the camera. If you've got any software such as Microsoft Teams or Skype or anything like that, have a go at reading it out to yourself and watch yourself back to see how you look. Because I think sometimes you're not hugely aware. Little things that I've noticed people doing, as I said, they might put their hand down, or a nervous thing, they start sort of swinging. If you record something back to yourself and have a bit of a watch, it can really give you some good tips of when you go to do the real thing. Thanks.
Omer, did you want to add to that?
We're just on the one-way video, because I mean, all the points and the tips and tricks that JC mentioned were all valid, and of course I do agree with them. The one-way video, for anyone who hasn't had sort of that experience, so at Amplifon, for example, we do have a one-way video interview process in our recruitment process, and we use SparkHire. It's actually quite fun if there's nothing to be nervous about, because there are some, those pre-recorded questions, and you're asked a question, you're given an opportunity to a few seconds to sort of plan the answer in your head. And then the timer can start, and you can begin to answer that question, and then it records, and then you can move on. But it is a fun way of interviewing as well. So it's nothing to be nervous about. It could be a situational judgment test, for example. That is something else that we do as part of our online assessment. So a lot of employees will have some form of online assessment. And the one we use at Amplifon is a situational judgment test, which just assesses, I guess, your ability of how you would behave or react when you're asked certain questions. So if you imagine, if you have a client who will ask you a question, you wouldn't really say, "Let me come back to you in 10 minutes to answer your question." So you would respond right there and then. So different form of assessments and different styles of interviews, I guess. But there's nothing to be nervous about. Just be who you are, be comfortable, and give it a go.
Excellent, thank you. So I just want to now ask a question around interviews in regard to what is a absolute no-no in an interview, and if you have any kind of funny stories, we do like those as well. But an immediate turn off in an interview, anybody? Carl?
I actually do have quite a funny story. This was years ago, and it came up when we were just practicing for this as well. An immediate no in an interview for myself, and potentially because I'm a culprit of it, is swearing in an interview. This happened to me about 15 years ago when I first started the industry, and I did not get the job.
I can imagine that. And I guess along with swearing, it's just that over familiarity. So thinking that the environment is, one where you can, do a high five or call someone by their first name if that's not how they were introduced to you. So my apologies, everyone. I just rescued a kitten from a not so great situation, and she's very clingy. So talk about online interviews at home. I've tried to keep her out, but she's making more noise than anything else. So we'll carry on from here. Is there any other funny stories or big no's that you'd like to talk about? Yeah, Omer.
Thank you, Heidi. I think on a more serious note, I guess, and not knowing anything about the company. So for Amplifon, for example, if you're applying for a job with us, do your research, show us that you are genuinely interested in joining Amplifon. We're not expecting you to do a PhD in our business, but go on Google, have a look at our website, see that you've done some research on the company. I think not actively listening is another probably a big no in the interview. You're obviously giving your time to the employer, but the employer is also giving their time and giving you an opportunity to have that dialogue. So make sure that you do have active listening. And lastly, not having a poor appearance or grooming. And there are some funny stories where, in my experience, for example, I had a candidate who showed up not in a formal way. The candidate had a marathon practice after the interview, so he came for his interview dressed up in preparation for a marathon, and did ask us if we wouldn't mind if he can just do the interview in that manner. So please do take the pride in your appearance and grooming as well. And we love your cat, Heidi.
Yeah, thanks. My cat, which I just noticed there is a question, the cat's name is S'mores, like the graham cracker marshmallow chocolate treat that we eat at campfires. Okay. Christian, did you want to add into this one?
Yeah, of course. So two things I think might be no's. Okay, so the first thing is when you're at the interview, don't act too casual. Try to appear as if you're very interested and engaged, because end of the day, your employer wants someone that's interested and engaged and interested in joining the company. If you appear a bit too casual, you might seem a little bit like uninterested or arrogant, and that's not the best look. Secondly, and this has happened to candidates that I've worked with in the past, excellent candidates with a lot of experience, matched everything, but they in their interview they talked negatively about past employers. So that was an immediate red flag to the person that was actually interviewing, and they didn't get the role simply based on that. So try to steer away from that. End of the day, they want to hire someone that doesn't have any of that baggage, or that might not be an issue for that company down the track. So yeah, those are my two no's.
Yeah, that's great, Christian. That lack of professionalism is demonstrated by saying the wrong thing is really important. So is there anyone else who wanted to add to that? Yes, Mandy, great.
So I guess I'm somewhat reiterating what the other panelists have said. Certainly poor presentation, because what's one of the first things you notice when they come through the door. And the research on the job. I always ask people if they've visited our website, and I seek to, validate that they have. So that's always a concern for me if they haven't done enough research on the role and the business that they're applying for. I think a little bit of humility is also good. Again, demonstrating that you view this role as an opportunity, and that it's something that you're excited about, rather than, here I am, I sort of, what's in it for me kind of approach. But also demonstrating your communication skills. When people give me monosyllabic answers to questions that I'm seeking more detail on, again, it suggests to me, or it raises a red flag that perhaps those core communication skills that are so important for us to communicate with our clients and explain hearing loss and audiograms and all those sorts of things may not be there. understandably, you're going to be nervous, but really try and sort of flesh out your answers so that you can give the potential employer a little bit more of an insight into how you might communicate with the clients if you actually get into the role.
Thank you. Now, generally during an interview, we ask somebody about their weaknesses or what are their areas of development. I just, this can be a really difficult question for any type of role. So what's an acceptable answer for this one, and what's a non-acceptable answer for this one? This is a tough question. Anyone up for it? Yes, Omer.
Thank you, Heidi. It is a confronting question. But I mean, let me assure you that there is no one on this planet who will be perfect. So we all have certain weaknesses, but I think I probably wouldn't use the word weakness. I'd say development opportunity. So the way that I ask questions, or we would ask questions at Amplifon, would be more about, where would you like to develop further? It could be a skill, and as I said, we always have that opportunities to upskill you. But be honest. Talk to us about what that development opportunity looks like, and also in the same, I guess, answer of what your employer or what we can do to help you overcome that weakness. Yeah, as I said, please be honest, and then for the lack of a better word, maybe proudly say what that development opportunity is for you, because if we know, then we can also help you overcome that.
Thanks. Yes, Christian.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult question that comes up at times. Definitely prepare for this question because you don't get asked all the time. But if you do and you answer it well, it's very effective for your interview. Essentially, if you think about why you'd even get asked this question, be honest, because the employee is trying to gauge your honesty. They're also trying to gauge how self-aware you are as well. So they want to see that you know where your downfalls are. So when talking about your weakness, make sure that you be honest, tell them your weakness, but then also explain how exactly you're trying to overcome that weakness. And then end of the day, is that still a weakness for you, or I'm taking these steps to make sure that's not a weakness anymore? So yeah, that's my thoughts on the weakness question.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on that one? Can't submit. Yes, Shani.
Sorry, Shani, we just can't hear you. There should be an
The phone is
unmute
muted.
option for you.
Hello?
Yeah,
Yes, there we go.
I'm sorry, I've had technical difficulties. In terms of strengths and weaknesses, that's something that we always ask. And the bad answer is no, I don't have any weaknesses, or I can't think of any. That's a hard question. Because to me, you haven't prepared for the interview. And one of the other things that I wanted to say, which related to the previous thing about interviews, is interviewing people who are just coming to the interview for practice, and if they've already got a job or they're not really interested in the role but just came for practice, that's discourteous to me and my colleagues for the time we've taken to go through your resume, consider your application, and it's also discourteous to other applicants who really want to apply. And we don't interview everybody. We might get 50 or 60 applicants, and we will interview 5 or 6. So that was all that I had to comment on.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll just throw to a question from one of the delegates attending about tattoos and piercings. Are they a deal breaker for you? And should they be taken out, covered up for interview? How do you think that should be handled? Is this an opinion one? Carl, did you want to jump in there? He looked. No? Yes?
I just think at the end of the day, just well-groomed is okay. Tattoos and piercings aren't a deal breaker for me. I mean, your skills and experience shouldn't be outweighed by that. As long, if you treat an interview like Omer said, you're getting to know like a friend, the more comfortable the interviewer is with you, it's not going to matter at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. JC.
Yeah, not at all. I think it's pick your audience. I mean, when it comes to tattoos, if you're going to interview wearing a shirt, rather than something like a singlet, but that all comes into the appearance side of it. And piercings can be taken out and put back in. In the end, what you choose to do on the weekend is totally fine. I just think it depends on the audience and the clientele. So if you're looking at adults of people in their 70s or 80s, how would they respond best and be able to build rapport? But it's definitely not a deal breaker at all.
Great, thank you. Yes, Omer.
Thank you, Heidi. Exactly the same point as others have mentioned. I guess it's not so much a deal breaker, but what I would suggest is if you have a tattoo which could perhaps be offensive in some cultures or in some for some employers, and it is visible, then see if you can try to perhaps hide it. You may not find it offensive perhaps, but someone else could. So by all means, you can wear a full sleeve shirt, for example, if you have too many tattoos, but it's not a deal breaker. As Carl mentioned, it's more about your skills and experience, not so much how you look. So be comfortable in your own skin, and if you prefer to cover a tattoo which again could be offensive, then please do that.
Yes, Mandy.
Am I unmuted yet? I think it's not so much necessarily always what the employer is looking for, but what we're advocating on behalf of our clientele and looking at the role that you're going to be in. And so it may not necessarily be that the person interviewing you has an issue about that, but they need to consider how the clients may perceive that. And with audiology, we're still, but in most roles, dealing with an elderly demographic, you have to be aware that they may not necessarily be as receptive to tattoos and piercings that are very obvious. But also what I find that can happen there is that can go to the heart of your credibility. So particularly when you're a new grad, you're already sort of behind the 8 ball in terms of building your credibility with the client so that they believe what you're saying and they trust that you know what you're doing. And if you've got elderly clientele, they may look at your appearance and say, I'm not so sure that they know what they're doing. So it's just something to consider. Maybe we're too conservative here in Canberra, but it's certainly worth thinking about long-term your clientele, because they're the people that are going to be working with you, every day.
Yes. Megan, would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, I think, in today's times, and I suppose because of COVID, what people wear now has been quite relaxed. But I think what you need to constantly remember is you've always been told dress for the position that you want. So if you have a look at what the people that work in the industry, so when you've been out on practical placements, have a look at what those clinicians are wearing and dress similarly. So, you can think to yourself, well, and not necessarily for your interview, I would dress a little bit better for my interview, but that's kind of, you can get a feeling of what's expected and what the grooming is like. So make sure you do your research, have a look at what is out there and visit, visit clinics and have a look at what the clinicians are wearing and what the presentation expectation is inside of the industry.
Thanks, Megan. Yes, Omer.
Thank you. I just want to add a point. I guess, obviously different organizations will have different perhaps expectations as well on how their employees should dress or groom themselves. I guess we at Amplifon, we value diversity in all shapes and forms and colors and whatnot. It could matter in certain industries where, for example, if it's a piercing, if you do have piercings, perhaps you could ask in an interview that if this is something that might be a concern, that they can take it off when they're speaking with clients or perhaps leave it at home, then you can put them back on. So some employers might be more open for that. But I think as times are changing, we're also recognizing that what's acceptable is also changing. So you have to, as an employer, you also would have to move on with the time and appreciate and embrace diversity in every way that you can. And Amplifon is proud of that. Thank you, Heidi.
I think that's a great answer, Omer. And I would say at Can Do, we do a big diversity and inclusion piece of work. And one of the questions we ask staff is, can you bring your whole self into the office? And we did recently have a person answer and say, I have a full tattoo sleeve and I don't feel as though I can show that at work. And I showed them our policy and procedure, which does not say that you have to hide your tattoos. And it just says anything offensive must be covered. So, you know, I think it is really important. I also would just add to this question a personal story, which is that 20 years ago, I worked at Hearing Australia, and I started dating a lovely man who also worked there as a technician. And he used to, he had a shaved head and painted his nails black. He was young, he was 23, he was a technician. He was the most asked for technician on site because he was such a gentle soul. All of our clients loved him. And once when he didn't have his nails painted, he actually had someone ask for the manager and ask the manager if they had asked him to not paint his nails. So, you know, we do have to remember that people will take you for your personality and for the way you act at work. So that was a really good learning lesson, I think, for a lot of us who kind of judged what other people would want to see in the office. So. Okay, we have a question back to CVs. So we'll just quickly dive to that one, which is about colorful graphics or fancy formatting and designs. Does that attract you to a CV? Does that detract, or does it not matter? Yep. Omer, did you want to answer that?
Sure. I think you can be creative in your resume, and by all means, I would suggest and recommend that use your creativity, but also be careful with the color scheme that you're using, because and with the certain formatting that you might have, because it might look absolutely perfect on your computer because you have those color schemes and your fonts, but on the employer's computer it may not come across with the same look. So do be a bit careful. Use the basic colors. I wouldn't suggest to go all rainbow on your resume. Keep it professional. That's the key. And when you do have a sample resume, I guess, as I mentioned earlier, show it to your family, show it to your friends, perhaps show it to someone who doesn't know you that well, and they can be a bit more open and honest with their quick feedback, because your family and friends might really encourage you, saying, no, this is fine, it's all good, But so the more feedback you get from other people, you'll get a much more better sense of, is this appropriate or not? But a purely black and white resume, sometimes can be a bit boring. In my personal resume, for example, I've used the separating lines between different fields with one color, with the blue color. So there's just offers some makes your resume a bit better visually as a quick feed, rather than something that's purely just black and white.
Okay, good answer. Yes, Shani. Yeah, go for it.
Hello, I just wanted to say, when you're talking about colourful resumes, I have received one where every single paragraph and every single line was a different rainbow colour, and it was not impressive. I think it was designed to stand out. It certainly did stand out, but it was not appropriate for a job application. So a little bit of colour, muted whatever, but not every single paragraph in red or yellow or green or purple or blue. Yep.
Absolutely, we don't want to hurt someone's eyes. Carl.
Yeah, I agree with Shani, but just going back to the tracking systems, if your CV is not formatted in a template that the system can read, it might not even go into the system at all. So just be wary of that. I've had people upload CVs into our system, and it comes out in Wingdings font, which is just a bunch of symbols.
Wow, that would be not so great. Okay. The question that I'm just going to throw at you, which we didn't prepare for you, is do you Google applicants before they come in? If you do, why? What are you looking for? And what would turn you off in that process? Or do you do anything else behind the scenes that someone may not consider? Carl.
I think everything these days is online. My advice is, when you lodge an application, make sure your digital footprint is actually professional. That's it. I mean, have a LinkedIn page. That's professional. So when your application goes through, generally, what we'll do at ACM is we'll look at your LinkedIn page if you have one, and we'll see if that just marries up.
Anyone else want to admit to Googling their applicants? Yes, Christian.
Yeah, I think like in today's day and age, like your online presence is very important, especially during COVID. A lot of companies have turned to online, so not surprising to see a lot of companies up their marketing and things like that. As a recruiter myself, honestly, I'm on LinkedIn a lot of the day. So when I receive applications, I normally go to the LinkedIn just to see their profile. It's pretty much an online resume, which is like what I'm referring to. But I'd also look at things that they might have shared or how active they are as well, because it just sort of shows those types of traits of like how passionate they are within the industry. If they're sharing relevant things on their page, if they're commenting on people's other people's posts, because yeah, that networking on LinkedIn is great. You should definitely take advantage of that as well as a graduate.
Cool. Okay, we're getting some really good questions coming through, so might just deviate over to those. So the first one is, what kind of follow-up from candidates do you find positive and negative after their interviews or after the submission of a CV? Do you want direct follow-up and communication? JC?
What I like to see was the requests on LinkedIn. I thought that was really good. Potentially when it comes to the grad recruitment, maybe not an email because there's over 100. But I think there's sort of that sign that you're interested in following the business is fantastic. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Yes, Omar.
Thank you. I think when you're applying for a job, keep in mind that there could be a possibility where you may not be successful in the first round, but then things can change quite rapidly in a few weeks, perhaps, or they prepared, things can change, and maybe there's a second position and so on. So the employer, how you end your interview and I guess how you end the recruitment process would also define the start of your next journey if that second opportunity is there. So when you're leaving, as JC mentioned, by all means, connect us on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is something that's quite popular. It just expands the network. You can maintain contact in that way. And sometimes, some candidates prefer to send a quick thank you note after the interview. That is something that, we do appreciate. It's always nice hearing some positive feedback, regardless of the outcome of the interview. If you feel comfortable, you can send a quick note, just to say how you felt and what your experience was, perhaps after meeting with the recruiter or the employer. So yeah, I wouldn't suggest anyone to not do that. I mean, if you feel comfortable, by all means you can. And for employers, it's always nice hearing a positive feedback or positive note. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes, Christian.
Yeah, so at the end of an interview, I'd probably suggest even asking the hiring manager, like, how long do you think it'll take before you find the right candidate? When should I expect the follow-up if I'm successful? Just gives you an idea of like how when you should actually follow up. And end of the day, if you do have that follow-up in grad recruitment, especially, sometimes they get over 100 applications. It just keeps your application a bit front of mind. So end of the day, you want the hiring manager to remember you. So I would definitely suggest following up or finding out when you can follow up, so that it's like a little reminder of, hey, I'm still here and I'm interested in working with you guys. So you don't just sort of fade into the background sort of thing.
Okay, great. If you have a name that is difficult to pronounce, what do you feel on a CV? Would you like someone to put it in brackets as to how to phonetically pronounce their name? Yeah, I can see all of the panelists right now, and they're all shaking their head yes. So we might just Omar, did you want to comment on that one, or?
No, I just want to say yes, absolutely. There are certain names that are a bit hard to pronounce, and in brackets you can put in how the best ways to pronounce. But again, when you meet with them or when you're speaking with them over the phone, and if you can correct it. It's okay to let someone know that this is how my name is pronounced, whether it's over the phone or interview. But on your resume, you can certainly put in brackets how it should be pronounced.
Thank you. Our next question is about single-page resumes. I think we hit this at the very beginning, and the answer was that single-page resumes are preferred, can be preferred, but generally just keep it concise and straightforward. So it doesn't have to be one page. Everyone looks like they're agreeing, but nobody wants to read on and on. So keep it, 1, 2, no more than 3, absolutely, but everyone's looking at 1 or 2. The next question is, if a candidate's previous working history is from overseas, how do you prefer they present it on their CV? And how would you want to reach the references? Do you want the reference information straight away? And do you want different options of references? Shawnee, you look like you're shaking your head on this one?
So we can't quite hear you, Shani. There we go. No, sorry, Shani, it's just not coming through at the moment. Is there an unmute?
Okay. I might just go, I did think I saw Carl raising your hand on that one.
So for me, rule of thumb, always have your CV in reverse chronological order. It doesn't matter where your experience is. It's easy to read. If all your experience is from overseas, still have it in reverse chronological order. References, we fully digitized our reference system, so we prefer email because we can grab reference from anywhere in the world via email now.
Okay, yes. Christian.
Yeah, I completely agree with Carl. Like for a resume, you want it to be easy to read and display it in categories and reverse chronological order. I think that's the most basic way that I like to see a CV. But end of the day, there's like no perfect way to do a CV. Just make sure it's easy to read and decipher. So like when the hiring manager looks at the CV, you know exactly where they're at the professional level, what they've been exposed to and things like that. It shouldn't be like you're trying to decipher the Da Vinci Code or anything like that. It should just be clear and concise, and I should give this person a call because this is exactly it.
Yes, Megan.
Yeah, I think when you're presenting places that you've worked overseas, I think probably the issue, and maybe why they've asked the question there, is we may not know what that role was if it's called something else in another country. So be specific about all the actual critical tasks that you undertook, so that we can actually do that conversion of are the skill sets correct and are the qualifications correct, or even if it comes down to the qualification, right, what it actually what you undertook in that qualification, and whether it has been transferable into Australian qualifications. So that's probably the key with regards to when you know that you may be judged on working somewhere else overseas that we may not be aware of. So yeah, break that down so it's really simple for us to understand, because I have dealt with that in the past, with past employers, not in audiology, but yeah, having that translation as to what it is and what your skill set is in Australia and if it's comparable.
Great, okay. And the next question is great because it actually leads to my next question, which is about behavioral interviews. So when you ask questions, and we do this a lot at Can Do, when we ask questions, we say, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of, and what are you looking for when you ask a behavioral type question in regards to answers? And if the person has had experience in a different profession and you ask for an example, how do you feel about them using a previous career or a previous non-audiology answer? Yes, Omer.
Thank you, Heidi. Behavioral questions methodology, I guess it's quite common. A lot of employers and HR professionals would ask those type of questions. There's a lot of, you can Google behavioral questions, and there's a lot of content online which would help you prepare the best answer. But asking those questions is important because it gives you a situation, and then you're describing what the situation was and what you did in that situation, and then what the outcome was. So there are various different methodologies that you can use to answer behavioral questions. There's no perfect methodology out there. What I would suggest is storytelling. So when you are answering a question which is behavioral based, explain it in a story. If you go on YouTube, for example, then there's a really good video on how Disney, the movie company Disney, how they use storytelling when they're making movies and how they get that message across. And in a professional workplace context, it's a really interesting video to watch out. But when you're answering, as I mentioned, your behavioral questions, explain it in a story, what the situation was, what you did, what the outcome was, and if there were any learnings from there to keep it more engaging.
Great, thank you. I think JC, you wanted to jump on that one?
Yeah, the behavioural questions are great, and what we're looking for is how you maybe interact with a team, how you're going to deal with peers and a boss, and how troubleshooting. And what I'm looking for is specific answers, and it doesn't have to be audiology, especially with graduates. There's not a lot of audiology examples that you have. So as long as it's a real life issue, what is the problem? How did you overcome it? And what did you learn from that? I have actually had someone pass on these questions before, so that's probably a don't. Have a think about it. We understand some of these can be a little bit curly, so take your time, have a think about it, and again, it's as specific as the key. Thanks.
Great. Yes, Mandy.
To ask questions that demonstrate the candidate's general life attitude. So it might give me an indicator if they're a risk taker, are they averse to change, do they sweat the small stuff, are they open-minded, and will they take a proactive approach to learning? And so those questions and the answers to those could certainly be applicable to previous roles, but they really give that insight into, again, how you're going to fit into the team and how you're going to manage a variety of aspects of the role. And one of my favourite questions is, what makes a great health professional? Because we can talk a lot about the actual audiological skills and how do you understand masking and what do you do with someone with tinnitus, but giving them the opportunity to answer that question really gets an indication as to how they view their role as an audiologist and the various elements that go towards making a good health professional, and whether they've considered that so far in terms of when they've been interviewed for roles.
Fantastic question, Mandy. I'm going to actually throw a curly one onto the end of that to say, when I ask a behavioral question, I'm looking for the language that a person uses. So we were hiring a manager recently, and we asked a behavioral question, and they said something like, I make my people do X, Y, Z. And, you know, it was just sounded interesting. The story actually wasn't that bad, but the language of I make my people made me wonder about how they actually work within a team. So language is important. And coming to language, I'm just going to ask a few of you that didn't expect this question. How would you define client-centered care? So when you ask about client-centered care in your interviews, what, if you ask someone to define it or talk about it, what are you hoping you hear in that answer? Anyone? That's a scary one. I know, but it does happen. So yes, Mandy.
I probably don't ask that question necessarily, because I think client-centered care should be a given as part of being an audiologist. So I think I don't necessarily always get a lot of value out of a question like that, because I think that term's been used a lot in our profession lately, and I think people are very well versed in terms of how to perhaps answer that question. And so I'm not sure that I would necessarily get a lot of insight into the candidate from asking that.
Okay, excellent. Anyone else want to jump in on client-centered care? Unfortunately, I know it is asked, so I do think it's one that some people feel they're waiting for a specific answer on, and candidates are a bit nervous around it. So yes, Carl.
My advice, if you get asked that question, make sure your passion shows when you answer it, as if you actually do care about the answer. That's all I've got to say about that question.
Okay. Great. A few more questions have just come through. So if your work experience is in the distant past, is it okay to write a short summary of that experience? How far back do you want someone to go if they feel it's relevant? Omer.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think if there's any relevant experience that you have, as I mentioned earlier, even if you worked in a fast food restaurant, it's okay, because if the customer service, if you learned the customer service, skills and experience from that experience, by all means, do put it in. Keeping in mind that do stick to a nice 2-3 page resume. So don't let that kind of experience expand your resume. But certainly, if there's any relevant experience that you have, which could be valuable to the role that you're applying for, that's important. I mean, customer service these days exists in every single job that we have, be it HR or audiology or finance director. But if there's any relevant experience that you have, by all means, put that in.
Yep. Did anyone else want to jump in on that? Yes, Christian.
Yeah, so like as a graduate, it's already the assumption that you don't have a lot of postgraduate experience or any hearing related experience. So you definitely have to lean on your strengths or what you can focus on. So any past work experience that translates, good traits that could translate into an audiology role, definitely talk about all that stuff. So not just your placements or your volunteer work or anything like that, but your hearing related experience in other industries that give you good foundation of skills that employers will look for in a candidate that sort of shows your customer service and things like that.
It doesn't matter how far back you go, and if someone has a gap, do you want them to acknowledge it or skip over it, or how would you address a gap in work time? Yes, JC.
Yeah, if there's been a gap, whether it's maternity leave, long-term leave, or they've taken a career change, I'd just like to know why. Because if you're looking at through their job experience and you do see that gap, I prefer it to be clear. But it's good to see if someone has had a significant gap, give us the experience that you do have, let us know why, and then we can discuss it. Thanks.
Okay, great. And this one we touched upon, is it a good idea to connect with potential recruiters on LinkedIn? I think we said overwhelmingly people said yes to that you would like people to connect with you on LinkedIn. Yeah, okay, excellent. And another question I think from me, a lot of times we ask the candidates during an interview if they have questions for us. Are you expecting them to ask questions? And if you are, what do you want them to ask you about? What's important? And are there some no-goes? Omer.
Thanks, Heidi. I think it's a really good opportunity for the candidates to ask us questions as well. I think you use this opportunity to assess if this role that you're applying for is the right fit, to what you're looking for. So do your research, and if you find something that you liked about Amplifon, for example, then share it with us. And if you find something that you need more information on when you did your research on Amplifon, ask us. It's that opportunity for you to ask us or whatever questions you may have. Maybe the interview was awesome, and all the questions have been answered as you went through the interview. So if you don't have any questions in the end, you can just say, hey, this was great, this was cool, thank you. We would love to have that feedback as well. So don't feel pressured to ask something if you don't have any questions. I've been in many interviews where it was scheduled for 30 minutes, but you end up speaking for almost an hour and a half, and it's such an awesome sort of discussion that you have where all the questions have been answered, or you just ask questions as you go along. But if you do have any questions, absolutely do share it with us and do ask. Keep it engaging.
JC, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, I do like it if someone's got questions prepared. There's a really good chance we may have already answered it throughout the course of the interview, in which case they can just repeat what they were going to have. But it shows that they have an interest and they've really prepared for the interview to have a question. So I do like it. And I think more specifically for graduates, when there is a larger pool, it does help pull you out from the pack.
Megan.
I think if you've got to the point of you know, getting through the whole interview, and yet questions have been answered. A good one that I've had from people is, what's your, like, asking me what's my experience within the company, you know, looking for what the culture is, because a lot of it, you know, you can understand what you have to do in your job, but how do people operate within the company? What is it like to work under that company's name? So that's a really good one when people are starting to fish for, I can see myself as an employee of the company, but what does that look like?
Great, thank you. Carl, did you have anything in addition?
I think Megan covered it in her last question, but in her last answer. But what I recommend, like Jay said, be prepared for this question. If the interview goes well, if it's an hour, 2-hour interview, like Omer said, ask what Christian initially said previously. When can I follow up? It keeps you proactive. And I mean, if you really love the company you're working for, and if it's a small boutique company, this person across the table from you may be the one that trains you and develops you. So if you have that rapport during an interview, this is going to make you stand out as well.
Okay, great. We had another question from an attendee about how important are your aptitude test results? Anyone want to answer that? Omer.
Thanks, Heidi. I think they are important for the role that you're applying for, and for the opportunity that you're applying for, because in some roles your math skills should be really important, or it could be some other attribute, for example, that might be really relevant to the opportunity that you're applying for. So I think it is important. Keeping in mind, though, that when we get the results of that aptitude test, it's not about us only finding out the people who have 90% score or 99% score. There are a number of people who, on average, for example, might be 60%, for example, or 70%. So don't worry too much about not being able to secure a high percentage. It is a combination of things that we look for. So at Amplifon, for example, it's a combination of what the aptitude results are, but also how your interview went. You know, what your personality is, what you've learned, what you would like to learn. As I mentioned earlier, skills we can teach you, but your personality is your DNA. That will never change. So don't focus too much on how good you are with Excel or with math or with any other course. There are always things that we can teach you, we can help you overcome or get better. So yeah, it's nothing to be too concerned about, in my view.
Great. Did anyone else want to add an opinion on that one? No. Okay. We are heading to the last minute now, so I just would want to open it to any of our panelists. If there's something you want to say at this point or add, or you feel hasn't been covered. Yes, JC.
So there's just 2 points. One thing, again, sorry, it is more targeted to grads, is have a think about what makes you different to the rest of them, because there are large quantities of people applying at the same time. So as an example, there's a question that we ask about, let us know what a greatest achievement is. And a lot of people do answer their masters. It is a fantastic achievement and you should be proud, but everybody else that's applying has that same masters. So just have a bit of a think about that. And the other one is as well, be open to different opportunities in different areas. Regional places and things are a fantastic opportunity, and the learning curve is amazing. And within 12 months you get that all important QP, and then you call the shots. So be open to moving around where the opportunities are, because chances are that's where a lot more of the graduate positions will be. Thanks.
That's a fantastic point to end on, JC. Thank you. I forgot about that regional aspect of it, and I do strongly recommend it. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists and for your time and for your openness and your honesty, from our small amount of technical difficulties, but overall I think we nailed it. So well done. Now you're ready to go have a drink, enjoy your weekend. Thank you.